This is the Badger, a spur center for driving spindle turnings on a wood lathe. My name is John Siegel, and I, along with Grinnell Moore, invented the only spur center with a safety guard. Wood Magazine named the Badger by Big Tree Tools one of the most innovative new products for 2014. The Badger is distributed by Rikon Power Tools. We named it the Badger after an animal known for its tenacious grip. The spurs are designed to engage the end grain of the wood and not slip, even with a minimum amount of force from the tailstock. The unique safety guard covers the spurs and helps prevent accidents caused by entanglement of clothing, hair, or jewelry. The guard keeps you from contacting the spurs with any part of your hands, and in most cases will prevent you from hitting the spurs with a chisel or tool rest. The safety guard retracts as the workpiece is engaged with the spur center. It requires no adjustment or attention from the turner and does not interfere with the convenient operation of the center. All that's necessary to prepare the workpiece for the lathe is to mark the center points on the ends. I'm using a marking gauge 4 times across the end, and I get the center marked there. And then with an awl, I just make a small indentation right where those 4 marks come together, and it looks like that. Do that at both ends, and you're ready for the lathe. Do not take a saw and make an X in the end of the work. Do not take the center out of the lathe and pound it into the end of the workpiece. Both of these procedures are time-consuming and counterproductive, and they keep the Badger from working properly. You can mount the workpiece on the lathe either with the spindle stationary or with the motor turned on and the spindle is moving. In this demonstration, I have the lathe turned on, and I'm going to bring the workpiece right up in contact with the center point. Notice that the center point protrudes sufficiently to allow a lot of leeway of angle in mounting that. Now I bring the tailstock up to touch, and the workpiece is suspended between those 2 points. But obviously it's not turning yet because the spurs aren't engaged. As I further advance the tailstock, it moves the workpiece closer to the spur center, and the first part of the spur center that touches the wood is the guard, and that gently initiates the rotation of the workpiece. It gets it turning at the same speed as the spindle, but it's not being driven yet because the spurs aren't touching. As I advance it further, the guard moves back and the workpiece comes in contact with the spurs, and now I have a positive drive and I'm ready to turn. Anytime you want to stop the workpiece for inspection or removal, all that is necessary is to retract the tailstock 1 revolution with the hand wheel, and you can stop it. And by further retracting the tailstock, the workpiece will come to rest right in your hand, and you can take it off. At that point, you could turn it end for end and mount it again. And you can do this any number of times, and it always returns to exact concentricity every time. Thus, the spring-loaded center point allows the workpiece to be mounted, removed, replaced, or reversed end for end while the spindle is in motion. It also allows the workpiece to be stopped for inspection, very useful during sanding, without stopping the spindle. You might be wondering, well, what's wrong with the spur center that came with my lathe? Probably something like this. Well, there are a lot of things wrong with it. For one, the length of the center point is not adjustable. So it's always either too long or too short for the job at hand. If it's too long, it will inhibit the entry of the spurs into the work. And to compensate for that, you have to tighten the tailstock more and more. This has a bad effect on the bearings of the headstock and the bearings of the tailstock center, and most important, it causes vibration of the workpiece. If the center point is too short, it fails to locate accurately on the workpiece. The other thing about these centers is that the spurs aren't very sharp, and they don't engage in the wood very well, again requiring more and more force from the tailstock and all the adverse effects from that. Other spur centers on the market like this have multi-spurs, And the problem with these is that the spurs are not really designed correctly. No part of these spurs is actually flat and axial to the grain of the wood, so they don't engage with the end grain very well. And again, you have to use a lot of pressure from the tailstock in order to keep these from slipping. And that excess pressure has a lot of negative effects on the vibration of the workpiece. Another thing about these is that the center point is very short, and it makes it difficult to get the workpieces on and off. And further, because the spurs are only arranged in a narrow ring, these operate on a very narrow range of diameters. For example, this workpiece, if you were driving that, this is too small because it falls within the size of that ring. And yet, with the Badger center, this will work right down to a diameter of about 5/8 of an inch. And you can see that the Badger drives that workpiece perfectly well. The new spur setter from Big Tree Tools has all the features you want in a drive center. Sharp spurs, a center spring, and it's the only one with a safety guard.